Yes, so I think what we should do, since our agenda is kind of like fuzzy at this point, is to, for Kate's purposes, is to have an introduction, so she knows kind of people's background and stuff, but then he does have a kind of a mid-meeting constraint, so we want to be respectful of her contribution and let her talk first, and then we'll kind of pick up from there. Yeah. You recording? Well, good. You're set to
I
go.
would like to call our ninth meeting of the Capital Advisory Board to order. And this morning we have a special guest, Kate Nass, who's the CFO. And as Daniel requested, maybe we could go around the table and do some self-introductions.
And we'll use this for the roll call as well. We'll use it for the roll call as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was figured.
So there you go.
I'm Robert Chandler, Assistant Director of Public Works.
My name is Cindy Wagner. I'm the Director of Facilities Development at Salem Health.
Good morning, I'm Bruce Johnson. I'm the lead capital from the Higher Education Coordinator.
Bill Foster, currently chair, and spent many years with the state in facilities. And
Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Kaiser. I'm an architect and builder up here in Portland.
Should I go next? Good
Yeah,
morning.
sure.
I'm Kristen Rutherford. I'm the Director of Community Planning and Development for the City of Salem.
We do have another member, Bill Messner, who is going to be joining later, but he is the vice chair and he works for PG.
so I guess it's
I think we should just
Yeah.
informally transition over to Kate.
your
It's your meeting.
Thank you, everyone. And just a little bit of introduction for me, because I've been around in the Chief Financial Office for a while. You probably interacted more with George Don before. I was his deputy for about 5.5 years before I became the Chief Financial Officer back in April. So while he came to the meetings and maybe talked to you all, I definitely was aware of the work you do and appreciate the review and help in building the governor's budget as we get to making sure that agencies are putting together capital requests that are ready to go, make sense, scoped correctly, all that kind of stuff. So thank you. So I guess I'll just kind of dive right in. And obviously this is, so the last time we did the governor's budget, we were transitioning from Governor Brown to Governor Kotek. And so what was happening is we were kind of building all of the budgets based on kind of anticipating we knew there was going to be a transition of a governor. So there's a lot of different options that got put on the table. And then we had to wait to find out elected and then put their budget together very short order. It was the transition budgets are a very different budget. It's very much longer for our team, I'll be honest. But it is, and it kind of means there's a lot more decisions that are made very quickly at the end while we've done a lot of work. And it also kind of makes for a lot more decisions. So like there were more things on the table because we all wanted to put those choices for the new incoming governor. As we're building Governor Kotek's budget for next biennium, she's looking to kind of have a more focused, prioritized list of kind of what that balanced, I would say, budget request from agencies. So one of the things that she was working through when she came in was there are so many choices and she was having to say no to everything because there was not resources. And so that was really kind of a hard thing because there were so many things on the table and then so many good ideas, but we couldn't move on them. And so what she's looking at doing this next time is kind of working with, and I should go back a little bit. Traditionally, or over the course of the last few, so I've been in budget so I'll be candid, my daughter is turning 14 and I started when I was pregnant with her. So it's been 14, 15 years. But agencies will put together agency request budgets, and a lot of times we won't constrain those. We basically just say, go forth, tell us all your great ideas. Let's figure out what's the right thing to do and put it all on the table. And so agencies will come in with an agency request budget that's pretty robust. Program expansions, new buildings for this group, you know, like significant increases, but we almost never can afford them, right? Like we don't have that level of resources. So then it's a matter of prioritizing and figuring out. And so I always think about the agency request budget as it's like this big funnel, and we start there and then we come down with the governor's budget, we get to a balanced budget, and then we figure out with the legislature what the final budget is. When Governor Kotek's looking at this, she's looking more at like not having all of this work done from a technical perspective, from a agency efficiency resource perspective, where we've gone out and done, you all have done reviews on projects that may never go, you know, like things like that. So trying to really focus our efforts on things that are really kind of what we're thinking will move forward. And so one of the things that we're working on with agencies right now is kind of figuring out what they're thinking they might want, and then working with the governor's office and our teams of what would be within resources. And just the economic forecast just came out earlier this week, but there really wasn't any surprises, but we're not looking at a robust revenue growth in the future. Like we're not seeing a significant increase where we're going to have significant amounts of additional general fund and discretionary lottery fund. Now, I will say there are agencies that are funded with other funds, either fee-based or assessment-based, that's a little different. Programs at DAS are funded through rent, you know, so there's different funding streams depending on different programs. But from a general fund, lottery fund perspective, we're not looking at a growth in 25, 27. So when we're looking at that, we kind of we're hoping to really work with the governor's office ahead of agencies putting a bunch of work into pricing specific projects, getting all the background done, doing all the position classification reviews, which is all the stuff that we have to do when it's a final decision, but we may not need to do it throughout this process as we're building budgets. And so I think what will come out of that is an agency request budget that's more focused and prioritized to stuff and probably not as big. So if I just go back to the 23-25 biennium, when agencies put their budgets together, I want to say they were the policy packages, which is how we do our budget. We have what's called current service level, which is how much will it cost to do what we're doing right now, next biennium. The point in time, like estimate of the cost for next biennium. And then there's policy packages, which are like the enhancements. And I think agencies had put together 945 policy packages across the state. And it totaled about $5.5 billion more than we had resources for general fund and lottery fund. So that's just a lot of work that went into all of those packages that we're kind of like trying not to spend our time doing. We're really focused on getting our teams focused on the stuff that's kind of going to happen, or maybe. Now, we all know that revenue forecasts come in. They surprise us sometimes, both ways, ideally, not the wrong way, but some days that happens. We still kind of need to do some extra work, but not, because we need to have choices at the end, but maybe not $5 billion worth of choices. So what I wanted to talk to you all about is kind of how, from a timing perspective, because we don't want to spend a lot of time developing what would be like a project proposal. So if I look at if I'll take a previous example of the Department of Corrections had a couple of years ago come forward with a request for a public safety campus. You all looked at it, spent a lot of time on it. They spent some time on it. I think we all figured out that was not the right thing to do at the time, given where we were, and that was the right decision. But we probably could have had that conversation much sooner rather than going through all that work. And so I keep using that as an example, as an opportunity for us to kind of be more streamlined in our process. So what I'm hoping is agencies, so going back to the timeline, what I'm hoping is agencies and the governor's office and our team are working on what they're thinking they want to do. We have a little bit of an idea. We're starting those conversations. For those of you who don't work around state government or the legislature, you may or may not know their building is filled with people over there again. So that our February is a little focused there. But probably coming back in March or April, we'll have a pretty good idea what we think we want to pull forward. But from a planning perspective, getting your review, I'm hoping it'll be fewer things for you to review, but I still want a thorough, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to figure that out. And so from a timing perspective, and Daniel and Renee and I talked earlier this week of like what might make sense. We still have the deferred maintenance portion of it. Agencies will still come forward with deferred maintenance requests. There were two thoughts that we thought about was like, do we pair things up with, so we have like a deferred maintenance conversation with agencies because we kind of know we need to do something there, and then have a new building, new growth conversations at a second time? Or do we try to mush those together and just try to be, because hopefully it'll be more streamlined, not bring agencies in twice, you know what I mean? So I think that's what I wanted to talk to you about and hear your thoughts on like a timeline of if we don't have like that more prioritized list until maybe April or May, how can we structure your work and the review to make sure that we're still getting that feedback. And Renee, I should have said it was Renee, Daniel and Jeremy and I that met, but Renee, Daniel, Jeremy, what am I missing? Thank you, got it.
You're doing fine.
And so that's kind of where I'm at. Want to just talk a little bit about like, just if you focused your time more in the summer as opposed to ramping up in the spring, I think is kind of, but I can't commit the number of projects. That's the problem because we're still sorting through those. And there were some, don't get me wrong, there's always some.
Question.
Yes.
It seems to me that there are different levels of needs that we attempt to do. Some is about capital projects. Some is about the maintenance plans.
Yep.
And then there's the 2%.
Yes.
So one possibility would be to split some of this up
Mhm.
and look at it at different times for different purposes.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether that better fits your needs or anyone else thinks about it.
The only thing I would say, if I'm hearing correctly, if we would do it like maintenance versus new construction, sometimes what we think is right for maintenance depends on whether or not the plan has new construction, as we all.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I just
Yeah.
wonder how we do it at the hospital. It's like, well, should I spend that money? We all do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
That money, or should I just wait for that plan?
Build something.
At a certain time.
Yeah.
So that's it. And if we can separate it that way, that's the only reason I would recommend maybe doing it. Maybe the same way. And if you're saying that we'd have to do more meetings in summer, as long as you have donuts.
I can commit to some sort of sweet and I can bring donuts.
That's my only worry about separating.
I like that.
But if you know somebody's not gonna bring up anything other that we would weigh in and separate.
I think you make a really good point there because if I have a robust project plan for a specific address, and then I know that's not coming, that changes my deferred maintenance plan, which changes my report. So in my mind, if we can do it later, all at once, that's the best answer because one informs the other.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much of a difference it really makes, honestly, because whatever comes to us, we act on it, review it, talk about it. So it's kind of up to, the different agencies and their ability. It does help to have, for me, the capital projects and the deferred maintenance and all that, the operational costs together. Because still fairly steep on the learning curve there. I'm still enjoying learning about different departments, divisions and all of that. And so you get to, this is what we do, this is our scope of work, this is our org chart. And then you go into the decision I'd like to, it's helpful to have both capital, ongoing maintenance, deferred maintenance together when you've got the context. But again, I think for me, I'm happy to act and discuss whatever comes up with folks. And meetings, I'm always here unless I can. And for those on the flat screen, there are donuts here. Just gotta fill.
I think it's really good.
I guess then, one of the questions that comes to my mind is, I know it's difficult for the agencies, but does it make sense to look at the ones with capital projects first?
It does. What I'm worried about is if we'll be able to get back to them on what we think we want to focus our efforts on it. Because I want to give space to the governor and her team to kind of weigh in to make sure that we're not bringing things forward that quite frankly is probably may or may not be something we're ready to do. And that's the part that because one of the things we're working with in her budget from current biennium really leaned in on this is let's do the things we currently do well. And we as state government have been adding new programs since the pandemic, new things, stand up new things. And we really kind of want to get back to doing what our core programs are that we have been authorized to do and get those done well before we go expanding. And so that's one of the things. Now, from a capital perspective, we may not have been, there's a significant amount of work about office space that's happening right now, which every organization is grappling with remote work, hybrid work, and what your footprint looks like. So there's a little bit of that happening that will continue to be an issue or a challenge or a curveball. I don't know how, but something I want to say it's a challenge or an issue because I think it's actually something will be helpful but it's going to take a little bit. Which I think is part of our core programs, but then there's also any new construction or new project that would be different, so.
Any thoughts, Ben?
No, but thank you. And I'm just really curious about how the decision-making process is in regard to the hierarchy of those expenditures that the governor is going through. You know, what are the overarching goals of this administration in regard to this expenditure, and then how that affects this group? So.
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest parts is there's the debt, the bond-backed projects that are paid with general fund is one process of prioritization, and then the projects that are not general fund. So then I think one of the things for me is how do we look at all of the projects, all of them together, but also recognizing that there's different funding streams. And so that's exactly one of the pieces that she'll be looking through.
Because over the last couple of years, we've talked about is seismic upgrades, is that the most important thing? Is it fire life safety issues? Is it, what are the things that in our realm, what are the things that really are the must-haves and then all the way down to the wanna-haves? And that would help this group, I think, make decisions on what are the must-haves of the state in regard to facilities and buildings and development, and then what are the wanna-haves? And it'd be great to see that list in descending order for us to refine our critiques and observations.
Any thoughts, Christian?
No, nothing to add.
Yeah, the thought that came to mind as we've been discussing it today and in prior work is the whole continual improvement renewal, kind of those elements where we may be non-compliant with fire safety. And so I think we have to be continually triaged with the agencies to say, what is your highest unmet life safety code? And so if you're triaging the highest need first, it's going to be a lot easier to make a lot of other decisions if we know, okay, we've resolved any ADA, any gender neutral bathrooms.
Yep.
It could be electrical. And we've had experience where if the smaller investment in the renewal extends the useful life. And for higher ed, we have about 830 university buildings alone.
Yes.
And we often think, how can we preserve those assets? And so we're still thinking high on like repurpose and reuse and improve first. And then we go down the other path of there is no other option but to build something. And if we have to, then what criteria? How is it going to meet a state goal? How will it serve the state in a meaningful way? Does that help?
It does.
So can I add some context?
I would love that. I would very much love it.
I've been doing this for a long time, and I've got my little strings and all the little things that we do. And, we have adopted an approach that attempts to kind of get at substantially evaluating projects on a number of dimensions that we think inform the conversation that may be aspirational to the goals or the objectives of the governor, policy objectives. But those, despite it being proposed many times throughout the years, we've never really factored in what the governor's agenda is in as a rubric for evaluating capital projects. We've adopted things that the board uses as kind of a evaluative criteria that get at some dimensions of projects, but they're treating all projects as a request the same way and using those attributes or those aspirations as a way to kind of qualify it as a good project versus it needs some work. I think the aspect of having some sort of criteria from the governor's office and reviewing those projects ahead of time, I think is kind of exciting, I think, for me and the agencies, because it's giving you some sort of confidence in the success of your project. But also, I think for the board, you're knowing that they're reviewing a project that they're focusing on the characteristics of the project and the successfulness of that project, and not whether or not it satisfies some larger political goal or something like that. That's appropriate, I think, for the governor's office to do. So in essence, I see this relatively seamless and in separate kind of analytical kind of endeavors. It's just about fitting it into this box of timing. We have this, our really only hard constraint in kind of statute and rule is August 31st. And what they deliver. And beyond that, everything that has been sort of planned, exercised, and just maintained throughout the years is just ensuring that what is obligated from this board and kind of our office is executed in a relatively painless way. That's what my goal is to make everybody kind of gets across the finish line with the least amount of stress and pain as possible. The fact that we can at the same time elevate the conversation, that's always the best part of it. And if we can then trim some of the things up above and get some, shared, confirmation from the governor's office, I think that's a strength to the process. It's just about how do we configure the current way that we're doing this year with a deadline in a way that accomplishes all that and makes everybody kind of satisfied. And maybe we just treat it as kind of a trial year. We say that a lot, but a trial year. And then, as we, by 27, 29, we have things a lot more hard coded in terms of procedures. But I think it's something that we can easily do, and we may need to adjust on the fly, right? But we're good at that. We just need to have a little bit more concrete information from the governor's office about the when part of it. Because ultimately, the way that we've set the program up, the planning manual up, which is sort of like the budget instructions from your end, and this process is about taking what we're supposed to do and just getting everybody through the pipe and having a good, effective conversation. So nothing necessarily has changed. They're just changing what comes before their eyes.
And ideally not having you opine and spend time looking at things that aren't something that we're really interested in doing, or we're pretty certain from a prioritization level, it's not a higher priority, absent other revenues.
And whatever you can bring, we have to realize that idealism is the enemy of pragmatism. So when you bring something to us and it turns out, well, actually, we can't do that, that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
So it's, take the best shot.
I mean, as far as the execution of this, I think and this is probably my, George, I interacted more with George, obviously, he stated that. So, but the way that the information kind of works here is, well, it's fine. I think that we look at it as a conversation about, as a plan. They're reviewing a plan. So what is an agency's mission? What are they trying to achieve? What do they accomplish? And what are their problems? And with those problems, from a planning perspective, what are my chosen interventions to deal with those problems? It could be that I just need to invest in maintenance, capital renewal, or strategically, it makes more sense to kind of wipe out all this deferred maintenance by simply just abandoning and rebuilding something else or repurposing an existing facility. The board over the years has preferred to see that all in a context of one kind of narrative presentation, where you, as Robert had mentioned, you're getting sort of the fundamentals of what's going on at the agency, what is impacting their programmatic needs, and then how is that translating to the need for capital to successfully implement those programs. And based upon where they're at right now, how do they impact their portfolio, either by adding space, changing space,
Right.
all that kind of stuff, to solve those problems. So the one time coming, two times coming, I think it's preferential for just the board to have, and also just the scheduling part of it, just to have one time at the podium for these agencies, and keep it that relatively consistent, because all of our review criteria is sort of based around that whole kind of narrative presentation about what's driving the agency's needs for this, and here's our proposal. What do you think? I think that maintaining that would be, at least for this year, would be important. So in essence, if we can figure out how we do the initial review from the governor's office and say, this is what we're going for, you do your deferred maintenance work in your workbooks. What this really impacts is your major construction acquisition project requests. And we can decide whether or not we review those on the fly in the middle of your presentation, or if we invite people back in August, as we have customarily done. So, because the board would, if an agency has a big project, say they want to build a $50 million building, and it's just like, here's our plan presentation, here's this big thing in here for $50 million. The board really doesn't have time in a meeting that has 4 other agencies presenting to dig into that project. So if it's a big ticket item, we have them come back in August and they do a full presentation on just that project. So it's like, what's the cost? What's the land use? What's the site? And that in itself is an effort. And if it doesn't have any viability, that is it's a waste of effort.
Let me give an example that I'm excited about this. We have aviation and air. But how an infusion of general fund, I don't know how they. So, is that even worth reviewing?
Right. And that is, and yes, I use the aviation example all the time as the other one, which is they wanted to replace their roof. And then we said, you all told the people who don't deal with, like the CFO team that doesn't deal with building planning as much as you all do, said it's not worth replacing the roof on that building. Like, it's not worth it. Like, that was this aha moment to us that having this group was so beneficial to have, because that didn't spend their money on something else. Aviation does have a budget challenge from a funding perspective, and we do need to have a decision of what we want to do with that. And so those are the kind of things that I want to hear from the governor's office before we bring something to you, to know kind of what we would feel comfortable with on a building for them. But I hear you, yeah. There are other funding things around aviation gas, the fuel tax that's happening too, that I will let policymakers work through, but those are conversations that are kind of taking place as we go into the next biennium too. But having you all tell us the scope of the project, whether that's the appropriate cost and viability and all of that stuff, is very beneficial. We can work through, then it becomes the choice on the funding side too. So but I don't want to spend your time on it if it's not feasible.
I think it's fair to say that we could probably push another meeting into August and not make it a specialized meeting, but if we have to have just a full-on meeting with agencies and just shift the schedule around to accommodate that, and give the governor's office until maybe, it'd be wonderful if it could get accomplished by April, but I just, let's say
Yeah.
May.
Yeah, I don't know if I can get April, but I always aim for it, but you always have to, there's little things that will pop up and then there's decisions. So, but we might be able to get some of it, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm hoping to filter as we roll through this. But
So
again, my plan versus the governor's plan, like we got to work through that process. So
The alternative is that we kind of scrap how we've traditionally done it and say, like, we're going to have 2 or 3 big meetings, and they're going to be like in July and August or something like that, or June, July, instead of like, it has to be on this date, and we can just plan ahead to have kind of a special meeting. I'm okay with that. It's just, I'm asking you, you're the ones that have to.
It kind of depends on individual schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
I know I can say that personally, I probably can accommodate that just fine, but I don't have the constraints some others have.
I mean, double meetings or something. I don't know.
Again, I agree, if we can make that work out. I appreciate the effort and it's an ongoing problem, and it makes me smile. We all try to figure out, how much work do you do to figure out if a project is worthwhile? What's the value of plan, right? We all face that. I appreciate that. And so the more time you have to do that, I think it makes sense, so that you do bring to us, like, and as you figure out how much information you need to know, is it going to go anywhere or isn't it? That just, we deal with that. I just came from a meeting talking about that very thing, right? So I appreciate that. And I think if we can, from my perspective, we can support by having meetings later. I think that's a good plan, if that works.
So it sounds like between now and whenever we can formalize this, we need to know kind of what the governor's office is thinking in terms of time frame.
Mhm.
And then I think from an administration point of view, I need to like play around with the scenarios and just like mock out some availability things and different alternatives for how we could approach that. I think, again, by and large, the review stuff, all that can be as it is now. It's just about what you're going to see and when you're going to see it. And so that would be my approach, is like, we just need to like, behind the scenes, kind of like figure out the sequencing of things. Yeah. Sound good?
I really appreciate this. This is great. It's good.
I wanted like just one more little editorial thing. So something that continuously comes up biennium after biennium is what the board can do to kind of provide their recommendations, their commentary after we're done in August, and relay that in some meaningful way to either the CFO's office, the director's office, or something where, because as I explained, traditionally it'd be like, I would compile all this information, synthesize it down. I would meet with analysts and kind of review everything. But our spirit here is to kind of try to be a little more transparent and also feel that there's a kind of a transactional relationship with the board and who they are informing. And I think if we could also look at what would be kind of a desired or optimal kind of output of the board that says, here's what we recommend. It may be that our recommendations could be from a programmatic thing where we're looking at like, here's this trend we're seeing in the building construction world. The state should be focused on this, or we think this project solves a major problem and we really are going to put our support behind it, or this thing is a boondoggle. I think it would be personally be very, I think, helpful for the board to kind of feel like they're kind of tethered to that transaction in a way where it's just not me being the conduit, even though that's how we typically kind of do things. I'm just trying to be supportive of their level of engagement and interest in the process.
I can definitely, the fun thing about resetting stuff is you get to kind of have that conversation with the governor's office of like resetting, hey, how else can this work? You know, and so we can have those, because I think that's a good point. Something the board wants me to take to the governor, go for it. Like I can just talk to her about her and her team about what they're thinking and how to use this group from a capital, like a resource of, I mean, this room is filled with people who know this stuff, so.
I think it's fair to say, you know, I was around when this was conceived and it's evolved significantly and continues to evolve. And it's, you know, again, trying to get that match as to where it works best with the process is really what's, you know, I think our collective desire.
Okay. Think about that. Awesome. All right. I really have to head out here.
We make it in time.
You made it in 3 minutes, plenty of time. I took more of your time than I thought I was going to, so thank you for letting me be here. And feel free to reach out. Daniel, Renee, Tamara, they all know how to get to me pretty quickly, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet you.
Okay. So
I guess so. Action items, just for the notes, we're going to internally confirm our approach and the timing. I think if we have a March meeting, it will be to kind of clarify that or anything else that needs to take place. And so we will likely won't be having a kickoff next meeting like we traditionally do. We just need to recalibrate.
Yeah.
So, but I will say that the other thing on our agenda was the planning manual. I have put the planning manual together, but it's going to change a little bit. But just we were going to review this, but I think it's premature to kind of, if you can see that all the things that we've worked on for the past couple of years that now have referential integrity to revised administrative rules and procedures with clear direction helps substantially.
So does it make more sense to talk about that in March?
I think so, because it's probably not going to content-wise change much, but I just would rather have a full conversation about our approach in one sitting once we've resolved how to do it. Does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So with that, a little bit of curveball. That's all I have, unless Renee has anything else.
I do not. Thank you all for your flexibility. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, so 15 minutes ahead of schedule for the agenda.
So Jeremy stepped out, but I think I wanted to talk to you before you took off, but I don't think he was expecting us to end this. So I know you had a phone call you had to go to, so maybe you have to follow up with.
Okay.
I'll have to follow up.
I can
Yeah, or just, I'll tell them to get in touch with you.
Sure.
So unless anybody has anything else, I'd say we're good until our next meeting, March.
Okay, so.
Thank you all.
With
Have a
that,
good morning down there.
Yeah. With that, I call us adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.